Okay, I'm going to start the meeting right now. My name is Billy Malone. I'm the current chair of the Altadena Town Council. I would first like to thank everybody for coming to this meeting. It was a meeting that we've all put a lot of time in making happen, and it's been a meeting that's been changing minute by minute, depending on the guest speakers and who we can get involved here. So welcome to everybody. We do have a very large room. First, I'd like to just make a note that this is not and should not be the only response moving forward. We all know why we're here because of the recent shootings that's happened. This particular meeting is the official response from the Departments of Authority and the response to the community's questions that have been received and asked of these departments. Moving forward, there are several organizations within our community that need to have a collective voice with this ongoing discussion, and collectively we can navigate the situation as best as possible. So this is from the response from the authorities, but we do hope to have more discussions moving forward from many other groups. This meeting is just the first step. We all need to consider, one of the things we need to consider is Altadena is one Altadena. We had a lot of shootings happening on one particular weekend very recently, but shootings are not a new thing to Altadena. They do happen, unfortunately. They've been happening somewhat over time at different frequencies. This recent shootings have been given some urgency due to the fact that they've been moving out of and into other areas. But if we look at Altadena as one Altadena, yes, absolutely it becomes urgent when it happens in our own backyards, happens in our neighborhood, on our street. Absolutely becomes urgent, but it should be as urgent to all of us every time we hear it in every neighborhood, whether it's in our own street or not. That's how we're going to move forward. That's how we're going to solve things. That's how we're going to be able to mitigate this situation. But it needs to have as much urgency from all of us, no matter where it happens in town. This is one Altadena, and it's about all of us. So I just want to stress that. Also, too, we do have a large meeting plan for everybody. We have several guest speakers, and as the local gangs and the people involved in the shooting do not see the boundaries or borders of Altadena. They come across and back and forth. So therefore, the people you will be speaking today are both from county representatives and from Pasadena who are involved in this discussion. The first part of the meeting, we're going to be hearing from Steve Morrell from the Pasadena City Manager, Chief Perez of the Pasadena Police Department, Chief Deputy Mood of the Pasadena Police Department, Captain Jacobs from our own Altadena Sheriff Station. We also have an attendance from the county, Los Angeles County, the deputy for this area, which is Savannah Moore, and the Justice Deputy is also here. For the 5th District. They will be listening in and trying to figure out ways that they can best support our community from the county's perspective. So they won't be speaking today, but they are here to listen in and see how we can, see how county can be even more proactive in moving forward. This meeting will last about just over 1 hour. It will be recorded, as I mentioned, so that it can be available to those who were not able to attend. And also depending on how much time's left, depending on how many questions we'll get a live response. The first questions we're going to be receiving and answering will be the ones that were sent in ahead of time to or council members received. And then if you have questions, please make sure you put them in the chat box. And the moderator of the room will be going through those questions and then passing them along to be answered. Because of the sheer number in the room, everyone will be muted. And then your questions will be answered. If we run low on time, depending, the meeting will be lasting just over an hour. If we run low on time, we intend to respond to as many, if not all the questions as possible. So if we run out of time, those questions will be responded after the meeting. So we will post those. And anyway, that's it. We just want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. We want to, this meeting is about being informative and educational on the current situation. the history behind the current situation. This is not new. This is not a one-day thing, and how to mitigate it moving forward. So in saying that, I'm going to move forward to our first speaker, Steve Morrell, the city manager from Pasadena.
Hi, good afternoon, and happy holidays to our neighbors to the north. I appreciate the invitation that was extended to myself and the command staff of our police department. As Mr. Malone indicated, crime, particularly gang crime, knows no boundaries. So there will be occasionally an incident in Pasadena or Altadena, but it may be tied to something that happened out in the Inland Empire. So you'll hear more about that. It's very disconcerting, the recent increase in violence in our communities generally. We've had a couple of murders recently in our Villa Park area, and so we know how difficult this feels for the community that feels under siege. Crime is increasing generally, but still the communities of Pasadena and Altadena are safe cities. But you'll hear from some of our law enforcement professionals this afternoon some of the things we're doing to try to stem particularly the gang violence. I want to mention that in addition to a robust and responsive police response that we work in close coordination with the sheriff's office, we're also currently exploring some of the longer term steps that need to be put in place to address the underlying causes that give rise to gang violence. Certainly the feeling amongst the parts of members of our community, our society, that there's nothing for them other than gangs. And so just this afternoon, I'm working with some interventionists to try to bring some additional resources into our area, which I'm confident will benefit both Pasadena and Altadena. But my purpose today is just to be here to show support to all of you, to listen, to hear the concerns, because again, this is a regional issue that the elected officials, the appointed officials, and law enforcement, as well as community, need to work on together to solve. Thank you. Oh, I guess I'm remiss. I'm supposed to introduce our police chief, John Perez.
Thank you, boss. Appreciate that. And what I'm here to do really quick is to talk about what our history of our gangs, but also what we're doing today. So I'll begin with a thank you for giving us this platform. Both cities work closely together in Altadena and Pasadena. In my 35 years here, it's always been a partnership. So this continues with the challenges we've had over the years with gang violence. In a moment, our Deputy Chief Cheryl Moody will provide an overview of the gang incidents we've had and what's going on from an investigative standpoint. But it's very limited in our information. As we investigate these crimes, we're taking into account the details in order for us to properly investigate, but keeping the community safe. Overall, passing the crime is lower than it has been over the last couple of decades. The end of the year crime that we're going to see this year for Pasadena is probably online a little bit 1 or 2% higher than last year. However, what we're seeing this year up to this point is an 80% increase in gun violence, and that's a problem and a trend that needs to stop. Overall, across this country, we are seeing an increase in year-to-year crime stats. It is still the lowest that we've seen over the last 30 or 40 years. However, it's a trending point that we should all be concerned about. The biggest average we've seen in any 1 year from year to year is about 12%. And this year we're seeing likely a 35% increase in violence across the country. So it might not be the highest, but it is increasing at such a dramatic rate, we worry about the future. When we talk about Pasadena's gang violence, we all know, if you don't know, that in the 70s and 80s, we had an increase in development of gangs to a point that the violence began in the early 80s with the crack epidemic. And we hit portions that were so high that today they remain as historical moments and terrible moments with the gang and drug epidemic of the 1980s, when Pasadena was looking at 10 to 12,000 Part 1 crimes compared to what we look at today at just less than 4,000. However, I am not sure the system today could take the amount of homicides we had in the 1980s and the tragedies in our neighborhoods with over 30 homicides per year in a small little probably 5 square mile radius area, and that's always been problematic. In the late 80s to the early 90s, we did a lot of prevention, intervention, and enforcement. A lot of people went to jail. It's one of the criticisms today. It did stop a lot of the violence. It did place people into the jail systems, the prison systems, but we began to drop our violence at a very rapid rate. And along with the prevention end of the community and intervention by the police department, with school resource officers and many of the youth programs we saw over the years, it was very successful into the late 90s when we saw our gang violence plummet. The problem with it plummeting is that it never eliminated. And in fact, we saw a couple of ticks over the last 20 years where the gang violence went up to double-digit numbers. And so this year, we're once again dealing with numbers that historically are low, 6 to 7 murders this year in Pasadena, half of which are probably gang-related, a little bit more than that. It's more of a concern, however, at the trend of violence. It doesn't matter if there's one shooting or 5 or 10, even one is too many. And it really hits us hard these days and how it impacts our community. Now, we're also dealing with a world pandemic, a crime epidemic of violence, as well as the economy. And so people are very concerned about how we police in our communities. People don't want to see the amount of traffic stops and pedestrian stops to try to reduce gang violence. And I understand that very well, and so do our officers. We've been through a lot of training over the last 2 to 3 years to improve our skill sets, not to eliminate the fact that we're not going to conduct traffic stops and we're not going to conduct pedestrian stops. However, we are trying to do the best that we can and learn the best skills when a police officer sees that crime is afoot, might be occurring, or believe crime just occurred. That is the toughest part of police work for us to try to get at and try to investigate without, really invading people's constitutional rights. It's a very difficult place. We search for perfection. We will always search for perfection. But one thing I know is that we will not separate our socioeconomic issues, our race issues, and our policing issues. Those will always be present, and it's difficult. And so we eliminated our gang unit in February. Since then, we've had, again, 80% increase in gun violence. So it's a difficult position for our community to try to decide, well, we don't want a gang unit to enforce this, but we also don't want to see gang violence increase. So you have to ask yourself as a citizen, and this is what I think everybody has to ask themselves at this point, is how much enforcement am I willing to take and how close to my home do I want it? And so that becomes our issue. If in fact it's happening on your street, as I've talked to residents, they absolutely want higher enforcement, higher visibility, and we're trying to balance those needs with the fact that people are concerned about our policing. I'll end it on this point before I give it to our deputy chief to talk about the cases. This year we have seized close to 300 weapons. We have 100 off people's waistbands and from inside their cars. That is the best way to stop this violence. I do understand people are very, very concerned about infringing on people's constitutional rights. And so we train our officers how to communicate better. They have been to implicit bias training. They do understand the impact, but we're asking police officers to also follow their intuition when they believe crime is occurring. People do complain about too many people of color, Latinos, and Blacks being stopped. Unfortunately, in our 2 cities, we don't have any other type of gang violence to stop. There's no Asian gangs or no white gangs. I'm not dealing with Samoan gangs. I am dealing with Black violence and Latino violence, and it's happening that we have Black on brown violence, and it's beginning to spill over to brown on Black violence. So the only way to stop this is not to give you stop data that's balanced, so you can say, well, they're stopping as many white people as they are Blacks or Latinos. That's likely not to happen if we want to stop the gang violence, but we just have to be near perfect on what we do when we're investigating gang violence. Some of this violence on guns is not related to guns. Some of it's about drugs and personal relationships. And we have to try to take those guns off people's waistbands and from the cars the best that we can. As long as the increase this year, 12% of those guns were ghost guns. Those are guns that are very difficult to track for us. So as I end this, again, we are focused on intervention and prevention. There's an article in Pasadena Now today I hope you've read. Prevention and intervention have to be first before enforcement. When prevention fails and intervention fails, we are left with enforcement. And the more prevention we could do by visibility, by outreach, and by intervention, by, you know, going face to face with nonprofits and people that are messing around with gangs or guns, we do need that to come first as a priority. Enforcement should be the last place we go to. However, year after year, after 35 years, it does get tiring for me. I know what it's like to be out there and wrestle with people with guns on their waistband. I know what it's like to talk to people young people, when they take their last breaths as you're talking to them because they've been shot. So we do need prevention. We do need intervention. I'm fortunate to have my city manager who is following up on prevention intervention initiatives to reduce violence in our city. There's also a part for the community to play when it comes to reducing violence. Every community resident has a role, and I believe that's part of the educational format to help people understand how to report crimes to us and how to make sure that we get that information, because many people just don't want to be involved. So I'm sure I have a few questions to answer, but with that, I'm going to give it to our Deputy Chief Cheryl Moody, who will talk briefly about the investigations and what we're looking at. Deputy Chief.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Like the city manager has said, and the chief has said, this is a regional issue. And what our robbery homicide division we've identified through the victims and who we believe to be the suspects. These are in fact Blood gang members and Crip gang members, as well as some Hispanic gangs here locally. And I do know we have to be very careful so we're not racial profiling and wrongfully detaining and making arrests of folks, but through diligent investigations, we almost have suspects identified. Again, we do know that there are local gang members who are operating regionally. So since September, November, December, we had 3 separate shootings in Villa Park. Those were all Hispanic victims, and it's believed that the suspects were male Blacks, gang related. Not sure that it doesn't appear that the victims were gang related. Then on December 19th, there was a shooting in Los Angeles, and a Pasadena Denver Lane blood member was shot and killed in Los Angeles. Thus, we believe the retaliation that occurred on December 20th was a result of that shooting and killing. So that's the shootings in Altadena. We believe that the Blood gang members went up and started shooting at Crip locations in Altadena. Then the following day in Ontario, there were several Pasadena Denver Lane gang members attending a memorial for a female gang member who had got shot. And there were shootings, 50 rounds were fired at them from a car. And in retaliation the following day, there was a Crip gang member killed in Ontario. Then proceeding to the 23rd in Monrovia, there was a Pasadena Denver Lane gang member shot. We believe that was by a Crip. And then again, the shooting that we had here on Christmas Day, we believe that too was gang related. So as the city manager said, this is a regional problem. Our robbery homicide detectives are working with the County Sheriff's Department, Ontario PD, LAPD, trying to mitigate these shootings, to find out, number one, the cause of why all the retaliations, and then 2, how do we stop it? Who are the main suspects involved, and how do we make those arrests and make them stick? So as you know, the shootings that occurred in Altadena, there was an arrest made here in Pasadena. We believe it was connected to those shootings, but unfortunately, the district attorney did not file because there was not enough evidence to hold them. So those are some of the issues we're up against as well. But again, we're working with the regional law enforcement agencies and really trying to combat this problem. And that's all I have, unless there's questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. So as she explained for everybody, this is not just a Pasadena-centric or Altadena-centric. Much of our crime that initiated here in Pasadena, Altadena, has reached out all the way into LA, out to the Inland Empire, out to the Palmdale, Lancaster areas. And so we are very concerned. I have made connections with the chiefs in the various cities if we could help them in any way. And so we are challenged by much of what's going on around the area when it comes to COVID-19 and personnel, and ensuring we have enough officers out in the field to be visible to prevent it, but also to conduct an investigation. So we are very concerned about where this may go. But in the meantime, we have to focus on prevention and intervention as well as our enforcement efforts. And with that, I could answer any questions as well as the deputy chief or probably even the city manager.
Do we want to proceed? Let's proceed to having Captain Jacobs present, and then I will go through the questions, Chief, and we'll see who they are for. So Captain Jacobs.
It's Chief Jacob.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We are going to, we are introducing Captain Jacobs. Also too, along with Chief Karon Jacob. And then and we have to introduce also to the East Patrol Division Chief, Lieutenant Dave Orner, if I'm saying that correctly. So I'm actually going to start with our local Captain Jacobs, so she can introduce the other two as well as part of the division. And as mentioned by Councilmember Jones and Councilmember Knapp, we will be taking questions once all the speakers have spoken. So can I pass this over to our local Captain Jacobs from the Altadena Sheriff Station?
Hey, thanks, Billy. Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We've got 165 people that took time out of their day because this matters, and they have concerns. And this is the reason why I thank the Altadena Town Council for putting this together and reaching out to local law enforcement partners just to make sure that everybody knows nobody's turning a blind eye to the situation. And I really, following on the footsteps of the Pasadena chief and deputy chief, I echo everything they're saying. I'm just going to give you an update, keeping it local within Altadena, because that's really all I can impact is our beautiful town here of Altadena. But I'm going to tell you that we saw an uptick in gang violence start in October when we had a shooting at RJ's Liquor, and it was between a African-American gang and a Hispanic gang. Fortunately, there were rounds fired, but nobody got hit. But nonetheless, that kind of started the friction. We've had a few other shootings since then. On November 13th, we had a male black shot on Raymond and Woodbury. We believe that he was shot by a Via Park Boy Hispanic gang member. He did survive. He got shot twice. Again, on November 14th, there was a gunfire exchange at Fair Oaks and Calaveras at the Town and Country liquor store. There was about 20 different rounds fired at a group standing out front of that liquor store. Fortunately, nobody was hit. Several cars were hit. People in the cars, their vehicles were hit. So it was a very, very scary time for everybody there, as you can imagine. And then again, bringing it into December on the 4th, we had again, right there at Town and Country, we had what we believe a crime getting ready to occur with gang violence right there in front of Town and Country, that our deputy probably interrupted that crime and was then shot at, but we do not believe she was the initial target. So this is all gang related. As Pasadena gave in their presentation, it's stemming from as far out as the Inland Empire all the way down to LA to Venice, and it's just reaching back here because of its connection between the Altadena Black Crips and the Pasadena Denver Lanes, folks that they know where they live and they come back to do their retaliation. So what I want to do is I do want to let you guys know our Part 1 crimes, which are more serious violent crimes, are down 25% overall for the year of 2020, which is remarkable. And that's all really about the good police work we're doing out there and you folks calling in and giving us tips on things that you see that help us solve some of these cases and perhaps prevent them. But that's a little bit of the current history going on right now, reasons why people are really wanting this meeting to happen and are very unnerved, which I totally understand. I'm not leaving the 20th out, the Sunday shootings, but I want to turn Operation Safe Streets. I'd like to introduce my chief, Kathryn Jacob. She's the chief of East Patrol Division and very much supporting all of her 6 stations that she is responsible for. So Chief Jacob, if you could give a few words.
Excuse me. Thank you for having me here. In the interest of time, I don't want to take up too much time, and I want to make sure that Lieutenant Honor has a chance to speak. But I just echo what Chief Perez and Deputy Chief Moody and Captain Jacob said. It's really a collaboration between our department and Pasadena PD and the communities that are going to make a difference in this gang violence that's going on. So we will continue to work together that we have been doing for years, and we will do so moving forward until we can get this situation under control. So I thank you for hosting this meeting and for everybody that's participating. And I will go ahead and pass it over to Lieutenant Honor.
Is he in?
Veronica, do we need to unmute? Do we see?
I don't see him.
He had to call in. He's on another detail, but he's on the
He
phone.
may need to unmute
Okay.
himself,
Oh.
I believe it's *6.
What's it, which number? Do we know his number? There's quite a few people on the phone.
Yeah, we shouldn't give out his number, so make
No,
sure.
I'm just looking to see if we can see the last few digits.
What was that star?
*6.
While we're waiting for that, can I ask Captain Jacobs a couple of quick questions as far as, could you give reference to the fact that mentioning about Crime Stoppers and how it's completely anonymous, and also to any relevant information you have right now regarding the reward from county?
Absolutely. Thanks for reminding me, Billy. So yes, we do have, we have asked the community if they see, if they see anything that is of suspicion or heightens their awareness to obviously call the sheriff's station. But if it's something in relation to the crimes that have occurred, we've asked you, you can call in anonymously, or you can type in Crime Stoppers, and we'll put the address in the chat. So you can remain anonymous. We're more than willing to meet anybody away from Altadena to talk if that's what they need, but we really do need the community's help. I know there was a lot of folks out there on several of these shootings that saw exactly what happened, and they're just afraid, rightfully so, to say anything for retaliation. So Supervisor Kathryn Barger, they honored a $50,000 reward for the arrest, apprehension and arrest and conviction of the shooting suspects, of the deputy that was shot at on the 4th of December. So that reward will be released out through our department social media here in the next few days, but it is on the Board of Supervisors website. And we've also pushed out a vehicle of interest. There's 3 vehicles that we are interested in. If you've seen any of those, obviously you can remain anonymous and turn in your any observations that you have. There were several people that were a little reluctant on the shooting on Santa Anita to provide a race to the suspects that were shooting at the shot and hit that victim on Santa Anita. They blatantly said that they were not going to release the race. So that's disturbing, because now all we know is we're looking for a male, and that doesn't help us at all. So we try to get it, like Chief Perez said, we shoot for perfection. We try to get it right the first time, but we go with what we know, and we coordinate our calls the way we know what's happening. So we just ask for your patience and anything you see. So let's see if Lieutenant Honor, are you on the line?
He can be on the line. We're gonna see his number no matter what. So he's just, is he the 213?
He said he did unmute.
Okay.
He's going to be a 562.
Okay, I see it.
Let me unmute it. I can see it.
I just tapped on it.
Okay.
So it should say unmute. It should be unmuted.
Lieutenant Honor, are you there?
Hello, this is Lieutenant Honor.
There you go.
There you are.
Hello, this is Lieutenant Honor.
We hear you.
Hello. Okay, great. The system prompted that I was unmuted. So again, my name is Lieutenant Honor. I'm with Operation Safe Streets Bureau. It's commanded by Captain Margarita Velasquez. And referring to the Sunday events, where it resulted in 5 shootings, 3 resulted in persons who were being injured by gunfire. Fortunately, non-life-threatening. We put a lot of information out early on with our partners in Pasadena Police Department and Monrovia and surrounding agencies. It was resulted in a quick apprehension of the suspects with the aid of Pasadena's airship. Kudos to them on that observation. We did take 3 persons into custody and recovered 1 weapon. One of the 2 weapons that were used in the shootings. That would have been the shootings on Olive Avenue and the shooting on Harriet. We did get video from ring cameras of several residents around the area for all 3 of those shootings. And the first one that was on Santa Anita, that was actually a red Mazda. So we do have information in video, although it's kind of grainy, but we're pursuing those leads. And the suspects who we have into custody, confer with the district attorney's office. And at this point, they wanted additional information, some witness information. The problem we're having is victims' reluctance to provide information or provide a positive ID. So that's a struggle for us. We'll have to gain evidence and other sources of information. I hope the DA will find enough to want to file that. What we've done in the meantime, since these shootings started to occur, and as well since Sunday forward, is partner with Pasadena, the other surrounding agencies, and bring in resources from our entire bureau throughout the county of Los Angeles to bring a high visibility presence of gang investigators in the area. We do know that preliminarily, the 5 shootings that occurred on Sunday, December 20th, were what we believe to be a retaliation event due to a murder that occurred in Los Angeles on the previous Saturday, where there was like what they call an underground party in downtown LA. And in that incident, there was a shooting that resulted in a Pasadena Denver Lane associate was murdered. And the belief was that the Altadena block Crip gang members were responsible for that shooting. We're pursuing those leads and working with LAPD homicide. And at this point, I think I've briefed up all that we have, other than my captain is committed to continuing shifting resources throughout the county to be present in the Altadena area. Thank you.
Captain Jacobs, before we move on, the question was raised about with so many people being home due to the pandemic, if that has driven down home burglaries and if there's any correlation between that and gang activity.
I can definitely say it's driven down home burglaries. That's definitely one of the Part 1 crimes that has decreased for 2020. Just I think more people are home and folks aren't bothering with it. We still have our problems with people leaving their vehicles unlocked and things getting stolen of high value when they go hiking, things like that I share at the crime management forums, and as well as the Altadena Town Council meetings. As far as the link to gang violence, you know, I think some folks are, you know, either they lose their jobs or they're in depression, things like that. I mean, gang members they're not oblivious to that. They know that that folks are going through tough times right now, and maybe some of those gang members are without their jobs and things like that. So I can't really draw the correlation to being home, but I can imagine you're like the rest of us, kind of tired of, sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Okay,
Okay.
we can start our questions and answers, I think now.
Yeah, can I just mention one thing, because I just noticed in the chat box, somebody actually asked a question is, can we ask questions? Absolutely. So please make sure you type your questions into the chat box, and then the questions will be asked. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we want to get through all the questions. And so if we do run out of time, we will be keeping and responding after the fact as well. So, just put in the chat your question and then preferably who it's directed to, or we can have it answered appropriately from there. I also want to mention thank you to Pastor Skinner, who's also here today. So, all right, I'm going to pass this over to, I believe Victoria has the first set of questions that came via the council members and email.
I'm going to let Veronica have those. Veronica has them. Go
Okay,
ahead, Veronica.
I want to just say, also in, we have Chris Holden's office, Judy Chu's office, Reverend Skinner. We have all them here, and we want them to take notice of what's being said, and we want their help in getting these problems solved. So we need them not just here to hear, but to take action in the Senate, in the state, and here locally. We need them to take action. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we need their help. And so I have questions that came in. And the first one is, will patrolling increase? That's the first question. So we can ask that to Captain Jacobs.
Will patrolling increase in Altadena? I think Lieutenant Honor kind of mentioned that we have, from time to time, we were able to get resources throughout the county when it comes to the gang teams to come in and provide extra patrol. But in general, patrol in certain areas is increasing. We do deploy our resources on areas. If we have, vehicle burglaries near the trailheads, we're going to have a little bit more attention there. So we do, based on crime stats, deploy our resources effectively. So I don't think it's going to be anything different unless we have to. We brought in 8 detectives from gangs, the OSS team, recently to just kind of do a saturation and enforcement from that respect. But in general, no.
No. Okay, and the next question is about the anonymous tip line, which we put in the chat. Do you want to repeat that again so everybody has that anonymous tip line in there? You want to say what it is about? What's the?
I can say it. You can report online via lacrimestoppers.org. There's a way to submit a tip there anonymously, or you can do so by calling 1-800-222-TIPS. 1-800-222-TIPS. TIPS. Before you move on, Veronica, Captain Jacobs, there is concern about with an increase in patrol and with an increase in these kinds of activities, what training do officers get, or what do you employ regarding racial profiling? Because we have African-American youth, we have African-American residents who need protection as well from gangs and from being racially profiled.
That's a great question. We obviously teach racial profiling when we go through the academy, but we have updated courses all throughout our careers because things are constantly changing. But I can tell you that there's a lot of good people in this town that obviously demand to be protected. There's some bad apples that we need to address, but we are here to treat everybody fairly and professionally. But I think Chief Perez really nailed it with, if we know what we're looking for, we're not going to be out there doing car stops and ped stops and people on bikes and things like that of those folks that are not necessarily the folks we're looking for. So we're looking for African-American gangbangers. We're looking for Hispanic gang members that are out causing problems. And they are going to get more attention, no doubt, right now because of the crimes that we've clearly identified in this conversation that are happening that involve those particular gangs. And I'll apologize now that if you do get stopped and you're not a member of a gang, it's not that we're gang profiling, but we are aware of a situation that's happening. And if we just turn a blind eye to it and don't address it, then nothing's going to get enforced. So we just ask for your patience. We ask for you to be respectful. I demand that my deputies are respectful. and professional at all times. But as your tensions are alerted now, so are ours, because we're handling these calls for service. We're seeing these people that got hit by gunfire, that are bleeding and that need our assistance, that some of them were gang members, but it doesn't make it any different. They're still a victim of a crime, a violent crime. So they also deserve to be, to have the protection that everybody wants in this town of Altadena and Pasadena. So I would say that that's something that we're constantly working on, and a great question though.
Okay, and then I think the other two questions were answered earlier about the kinds of weapons used and the uptick in gang retaliation and revenge. Those were answered earlier. And I want to make the point to the community that's out there, the 167 of you that are out there, we need to make our businesses, our liquor stores accountable. They allow loitering, they don't clean the area, they don't cooperate, they have cameras that they don't share. We as a community need to make those businesses accountable. They take our money and leave our community and leave us with the crime that they help not initiate, but they certainly don't help eliminate it or bring it down. So I just want to put that out there. So, and we can make them accountable by, I've written at least 10 letters to ABC, and I've written at least, talked to Chris Holden's office at least 3 different times. They're open from 6 in the morning till midnight. That's not necessary in Altadena. That's a start right there. Making sure they have cameras and they share those cameras with the sheriff. So someone has a direct picture. We don't have to worry about our sons being harassed because they will have a picture of the person who did the crime with those cameras. But that's just my say. Now I'm going to turn it over to Victoria.
Thanks, Veronica. Captain Jacobs, and then I have a question for Chief Perez. So Chief, if you could hang on. Do you have any information, Captain Jacobs, regarding the length of time it took for authorities to show up to the Santa Anita shooting? The question is, why did it take so long?
I wasn't aware that it took very long. That was, I'm not sure what number that was in the 5. But we were working with limited resources, okay, and trying to hold crime scenes, provide medical assistance, and get to the next shooting. You have to understand that these 5 shootings occurred in less than 2 hours, right? And then we had the Harriet incident, and then it pretty much there wasn't any more activity after about 5 p.m. until we made the significant arrest of the 3 individuals. So I wasn't aware of an alarming. We have an average of 6-minute response time to emergency calls, which is outstanding, given the pretty big area that we have to get to. So if I find out anything different, I'll be happy to share with the group. But what time frame are they looking at, or who had the question on the response time?
If you want to add, if you want to message me, I can share more details with the captain about the concern regarding the response time. Chief Perez, we have a question coming to you that says, you say that gang violence activity rose after this disbanding of the Pasadena Police Department's gang unit. Since crime is crime, how does the loss of a gang unit relate to how the department would otherwise handle these shootings and acts of violence?
Absolutely. So, having a dedicated group of officers trained to do prevention, intervention, and the enforcement on gangs helps to reduce the possibility of violence. They're not part of the larger group of officers that respond to our 300 to 400 calls for service per day. So when you could reduce the workload for officers to focus on whether it be burglary, vandalism, or any type of issues that are happening like traffic control, the officers can focus just on that problem to find resolutions. And so by not having a gang unit, what we basically did was eliminate a lot of the trauma we created over the decades. I was here in the 1980s when we had somebody shot every other day and a murder almost every week. And so having a group of officers focused on those that are causing the problems is a real important part. The uncomfortable part of that is that historically it's been Black and Latino gang members. So when we stop somebody that's not a gang member, that might be Black or Latino, we obviously don't like it. Personally, I know what it's like to be stopped as a kid in a Latino area. And so we know we don't like that. We know we don't like that type of policing. So the goal here is try to create a different environment and trying to be more predictive and intelligence led to understand who's causing our problems and be out in front of it. Well, it's not that simple. If anybody thinks it is, it's nuts to think that. So by eliminating the gang unit, we did lose a larger resource in the community that could focus on the gang violence and try to be more proactive to the issues. The other side of it is we reduced the concerns of what's viewed as racial profiling or the enforcement type of stops the community did not want to see. So this is a god-awful experiment in trying to stop violence. You know, I can't say because we eliminated the gang unit, people died, but we had not been looking at this type of violence prior to having a gang unit out there trying to prevent it. So it's probably based on a lot of science that we don't know yet, but we do have officers out there trying to be visible, still conducting these investigations. We just don't have that historical resource of officers out there to do this type of work. Hopefully that answers the question. Very difficult question.
The follow-up to that question, Chief, is are shootings priority over the other types of crimes that you mentioned? Absolutely.
Anytime there's been a shooting, first of all, we're now chasing it. We're not trying to prevent it. Once there's a shooting, our response to these calls have been 2-3 minutes at top end. And we've been out there very quickly to try to see what we could find, but it only takes 30-40 seconds, if that, to get out of the immediate area so the police don't apprehend you. So they are top priority. We do roll what we call code 3 lights and sirens to these type of calls, and you'll get a number of officers from around the city responding once they occur. But again, once these shootings occur, that's not the preventative mode that we want to try to get the officer to where we think the shooting's going to occur. Much more difficult to try to get to that.
Veronica, did you have anything else that came in that
No,
needs to?
no, those were all the ones that I got by email. Everything else.
Okay.
Victoria, can I?
Yes.
Sorry,
Kathryn Jacobs?
I wanted to research the call, the Santa Anita call. And basically the call came in at 12:11, 911, which goes to our La Crescenta or Crescenta Valley Sheriff Station. And our first units responded at 12:15. So it's a 4-minute response time. I think there was some question about when the fire department actually got to provide medical aid. You have to understand that when there's a shooting involved, until the area is deemed safe, the fire department is not going to roll in. So they're waiting for us to say there's no more gunfire. We have a victim here. It appears to be a safe area to come in, and then the fire department will come in. So I'm not sure, it wouldn't have been a 20 or 30-minute response, I guarantee you on that. But we did respond there within 4 minutes, and we do respond and make sure the area is safe and provide medical attention if we're the first responders. But fire department wasn't too far behind us and waiting for us to deem the area safe so they can roll in.
Thank you, Captain. Another question coming up for Chief Perez. You place a great deal of emphasis on prevention intervention strategies. What is the role of the Flint Ridge Center in that philosophy, and how does Pasadena Police and the Sheriff partner with the Flint Ridge Center to reduce gang activity?
So historically, we have not done much in my 35 years that I don't miss Jaylene Mosley like you would believe. She was such a huge impact for all of us to get me as a police officer to think the way I'm supposed to think for our community over the years. And so without her, it's been difficult. The team over at Flint Ridge is doing a great job. We have teamed with them with our reintegration program. We are one of only a few agencies in the state of California and across this country that have a reintegration program that we do work with the sheriffs with, who have their own at the sheriffs. They're very proud of over the years. It helps to keep people out of gangs when they're in the right mindset. So Flint Ridge plays a huge role in that and trying to do that. We have to remember when we talk about prevention, intervention, Flint Ridge really leads the way in helping develop other nonprofits. But if a young person is not in the mindset to change their life, we are not going to change them. It's much like if you look at the statistics for people that go to rehab or go to AA, these things happen and the failures happen at incredible rates because the people are not in the right mindset to admit they have a problem and then try to look for solutions to it. So it is a very tough initiative to try to reduce recidivism. It's difficult when you don't have the socioeconomic platform to give people opportunity for the services they need with family, for school, for education, for health, for jobs, for the local economy, all those things. You take all those away, us in law enforcement, we continually chase this problem over and over again. We solve it for a little bit of time, only for it to come back again. Why? We do a great job of interacting with people and the intervention that we do from the sheriff's department over the years and here at Pasadena. But the problem always returns because it's a bigger animal than we could begin to imagine with the lack of funding from elected officials across the state to make this decades-long initiative not just enough that we don't have a shooting for 2 months and we all think we're out of it. It doesn't work that way. So it'd be good to see something larger and better. But Flint Ridge is huge. They've done so much to help develop other nonprofits and help to make sure that both the Sheriff's Department and Pasadena stay focused on the right issues. And I don't know if the good captain wants to talk about the reintegration briefly on what the Sheriff's Department does, but they do an outstanding job on their efforts as well.
Chief, I think you covered the base as well. It's so tough to follow you. No, we work well with them as well. Our detectives are very familiar with the Flint Ridge Center. We have a few positions that were cut, put back in patrol that would have been integral in working with our school resource officer and our community relations officer. Those would have been two folks that would be working intimately with these groups and trying to figure out how we can work with the nonprofits, like you mentioned, in our community that want to help stop the youth gang violence. Or any other kind of violence, mental health, or anything that we can do. We're without those positions right now. I am working diligently with the board, the 5th District, to try to figure out how we can at least put one person back in play that can be our connection to the community. That's going to be super important. I'm sure there's a lot of people on this call that are shaking their heads that it's very important. I know budgets are tough. As equally as important is getting a gang car that we used to have back in 2008 to 2012 that came off of some grant funding, and it was able to have 2 detectives out there working the streets, working with the gangs, talking with the leaders of the gangs, and trying to keep a lid on everything. It is super important, and I won't go over what Chief Perez says, but it's definitely an integral part of trying to keep the streets safe and keep the gangs in check. And that doesn't come by just answering calls for service every day. You need to have a dedicated source. So I would really like to explore ways that maybe we could have a joint task force, even Altadena, Pasadena, on a grant, and just because the gang units are huge, they're important, and we don't always have gang violence here, but it doesn't mean that we put a stop to it right now, and 2 months later it's on an uptick again, because it just seems like this isn't going to stop anytime soon. So we need to get a grip on it now, and any help we can get from the board. I know they're listening, taking copious notes, and they've heard from me several times, and I love you guys. But I just think it's important. It's important that the community has a support from everybody on this call. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Captain Jacobs, don't mute yourself. I have a follow-up for you. I did want to let everyone know that we committed to wrapping the call at 2:10. It's now 2:02. I have 5 new messages directed toward me, so I will take a quick look at those after I ask the captain this question. The question is really around the LA Times reporting about Sheriff Villanueva and they're detailing his corruption, the sexism, the non-compliance with the Oversight Commission, et cetera, and so forth. How do you handle or respond to that information in a community that may lack confidence in your boss?
Well, that's a tough question. The sheriff has made a lot of very positive change since he's been in office a little over 2 years. But we've had some controversies. But I don't for a minute think that the sheriff has not addressed some of these controversies right on the head. One being the deputy gang cliques. He's had several investigations ongoing, people with being either demoted or seriously suspended or fired. So I don't think he shies away from that. I think he addresses everything that he needs to address. I think this is the only sheriff that I've ever worked for that is very vocal with social media, very open. And I think that helps the community get their questions in, and he answers them in a timely manner. So I don't know if you follow him on Facebook, but I'm not giving a Facebook plug, but I think it's important that that people that want to be connected, throughout Los Angeles County, not just Altadena area, really follow the sheriff, because he makes a lot of comments about things that are going on throughout the department and the budget concerns and all kinds of things that are happening. But I do know that there was a recent article that he is going to go before the COC and answer questions there as well. So I really can't speak on his behalf, but I do believe that he is leading this department in the best direction that he possibly can, given the circumstances that have been challenging. I mean, he didn't come in on an easy ride with 2020 being a disaster that it was, but really doing the best that we can and answering on his behalf. I think he's doing a good job.
Tori, this is Chief Jacob. If I could say a word, I'm sorry.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I think it's important for the community to remember and realize that the Sheriff's Department is a big organization, but really Captain Jacobs and the staff there assigned to Altadena Station, they're their police force. They're their law enforcement agency. And everybody that is there at that station, they're committed to that community. So regardless of the opinions that might come out in the media of the department as a whole or the leadership, the people who work at Altadena and the division and the whole department, we're committed to the community there. And I just think that's important to remember.
Agreed, and thank you so much. I want to say that someone that was rendering aid at the shooting on Santa Anita indicated that the response time of the ambulance was about 5 to 6 minutes. So it did not appear to her as a nurse that there was a delay. I also want to direct to Captain Jacobs general concern on the part of any of the participants on this call that may have provided information regarding what they saw, who they saw, the cars that they saw. Should they be in fear of retaliation themselves if they have zero gang affiliation just because they were there to provide detail?
I would say no. I would say no, not at all. The anonymous portion of this is huge, and we can do a lot with an anonymous tip, especially as a detailed anonymous tip. We don't need to know who you are, but the more detail you can give is the more we can investigate, and the more that we can take to the district attorney and try to figure out if we can do search warrants and things like that. We can all be a victim at any time. We need to be safe first and foremost ourselves, be aware of our surroundings and things like that. But again, if you see something, say something. If you feel after you've made a public statement or a statement to the deputy that's out there taking a crime report, give us a call. It's not, we're here to make sure that you feel safe, especially after you've given any information that you can to help us solve a crime.
Don't mute. Another question, and I think we should just address this directly. We have a number of parks in Altadena: Farnsworth Park, Charles White Park, Alta Park, to name the biggest ones. What is the law regarding public drinking at our parks on the part of any residents? That could be moms that are getting together to have Montinis, whatever. And how do your deputies approach drinking in our parks when it's when it's a white mom versus a group of, African-American folks that are getting together to have a beer?
Another good question. It's absolutely against the law. You can't have open containers in a park. Our deputies are going to be as enforcement ready as possible. Warning and advising is always our first mission. But if there's somebody that they're very familiar with that constantly is a problem in the park, they're probably going to get a citation for open container in a park, that kind of thing. And I think I know where these questions are coming from, and I'll address it now. After the shooting on the 4th, when we had the shooting on Fair Oaks, the deputy was shot at, and we had a containment set up. That containment did go around Charles White Park. Charles White Park is known for several gang members to hang out there, not only gang members. My biggest concern when we have one, possibly two suspects running through the park, is the kids playing on the bikes, is the families at the parks doing what families do at parks. But in addition to that, there was about 8 to 10 male Black gang members, clearly gang members by their tattoos, hanging out in the park, that saw our suspects run through that park, into the bathroom, change clothes, and leave. And they gave my deputies a hard time. So if we're looking for initially 2 African Americans running after just shooting at a deputy, that's who we're looking for. And I know we've addressed the possibility. We are now looking for 2 male Hispanics. We're still investigating that shooting, but that's what we were dealing with at the time. And it doesn't do anybody any service when you're trying to talk to people and get information and weed people out and make sure that they're not involved. Are they involved? And then they start yelling at our deputies and using profanity and flagging gang signs, and it just doesn't help anything. So yeah, you're going to bring attention to yourself. So if you were handcuffed and you were addressed that day, that's the reason why. But I'm not stopping the kid on the scooter and the mom walking behind her kid. Thank God they didn't get shot by bullets. So that's really the issue at hand.
Okay, we're coming to the end. I do have one more question. I do want to thank everyone that is here. I want to acknowledge there's a lot of resource information in the chat, specifically by My Tribe Rise and by Surge. So please take a look at that. It will be available during the broadcast or the re-recording of that, when the recording of this is released, is what I'm trying to say. So you'll be able to see it then. And we thank everyone who has wanted to participate in this conversation. This was, as Billy said earlier, intended to be our local authorities addressing the concern regarding the recent spate of shootings. This is not intended to be the work of all of our social justice partners who want to get at the crux of what causes the gang violence that we're seeing both in Pasadena and Altadena. And we would invite all of those conversations to continue via this kind of platform at different times and with as many people that want to be involved as possible. I think that there's, not everyone is aware of the gangs that are present in Altadena and or Pasadena. Do we have gang names that we can share with folks so that they know who we're talking about? Meaning, the specific question was, is the Denver Lane Bloods the only gang we need to be concerned about?
Oh, you got in essence, the Bloods, the Crips. We have Latino gangs in terms of the Villa Boys, the Northsiders, Southsiders. We have so many smaller cliques. It would take 12 or 13 names of all these small gangs that derive from both the Bloods and the Latino gangs. And so I think the names of the gangs aren't so much that you're going to remember these. It's the activity and the type of things that need to be reported to us, especially after a shooting. People do know some of the details, and I get the fact they don't report it for fear, but it is difficult for us because many of the gang members I've spoken to, they're feeling a place of impunity, not just in terms of not being arrested or being identified by people, but they hear what's going on in the county. The black on brown and brown on black are no longer going to be hate crime enhancement. So they're aware of some of this. They're aware that some of this is a little bit easier to commit a crime. To get a citation for carrying a gun after you get booked is no longer the same type of hammering sentencing that we've seen before. That might have been too much in some cases. So here we are trying to find a balance, and the gang members are aware of this. So the names again, the Bloods, the Crips, we do have the Villa Boys we're concerned about, as well as the Pasadena Latin Kings, and these are all some of the gangs that are there. But the smaller gang names, again, are not going to be as important as the activity people see.
Okay, Billy, I'm going to turn it over to you to wrap up the question. We will post the recording, a link to the recording of this to the Altadena Town Council website. We will share it with the community via social media platforms. We will share it with the presenters that were part of this so that everyone can get, and with the town council members, so everyone can get it out. Do know that the Crime Stopper website is in the chat. The phone number is in the chat. There is a link to a documentary about the history of the gangs in Pasadena and Altadena, and some resources, some very valuable resources are listed at the end in the credits in terms of who's providing support so that we can reach our youth early on and provide opportunities and options for them that disallow them from going into a gang. But Billy, I wanted to turn it over to you to close.
Okay. Okay, I'm off mute. Okay. I'm going to actually end with Veronica, who's going to do the thank yous for the people that have actually taken the time out of the day to join our community. I also want to address a couple of things in closing. That one that Victoria mentioned is that this conversation, this was a meeting about the authorities. Yes, we have further conversations with all our groups. Remember, all the people here who have concerns, we are the majority. Those with the guns that have been doing this are not just a minority, it's only a handful of people. We cannot let them control our community. This is our community, and this is up to us to take control of. So we are the larger number. And I think this meeting shows, and the attendance here shows, that we're not willing to accept this easily, and that we are willing to work collaborative effort with everybody, just to let those know that, hey, we don't like it in our town, and we don't accept it in our town. And so remember, this is one Altadena. Let's support each other from one end to the other end. It doesn't matter where it happens. It's about one Altadena. If you hear something on the other side of town, don't just say, oh, that's over there. That's on the east side. That's on the west side. It's all we get through this as an entity. So as one, one Altadena.
Okay.
So I'm going to pass.
Something to say. Before we close, I just want to really thank everybody. I see people on here that have been fighting for social justice and against gangs for decades, for years. I see them on this call and I appreciate them. Gary Moody, I see you out there. I see Charles Thomas. I see these people who have been doing this a very long time and they have the history. I see Jason. So I appreciate your attendance. I appreciate the leadership that's been shown here from the city of Pasadena, from the LA County, Kathryn Barger's office, Chris Holden and Judy Chu. I appreciate Reverend Skinner for showing up today. And I just think that together we can come up with a plan. And we need a plan. This is good, but we need a plan. So please stay engaged. Please help us come up with a plan to help our youth, to get the mental health they need, to get the resources in the right places. So I thank all of you. I see Elliot Gould, who fights a fight every day, every other month, he's in there. and I look forward to his partnership. But thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Steve. I've been fighting with Steve for 20 years. Thank you. So thank all of you guys. Captain Jacobs, thank you.
Well, I was just about to introduce Victoria on closing to say her thank yous. So I guess I don't need to introduce you now.
Veronica, they know me.
Veronica, sorry, because I have both of you online right now, and I'm
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
so now I don't need to introduce you, Veronica. So she said the thank you. So in closing, we just appreciate everybody. And if you have more questions and we can answer, and if we're able to, please send them to your council member or to myself or another member of the executive committee, and we will do our best to follow up. So is there anything else from the chair, Council Member Jones?
Thank you,
Councilmember-
everybody.
Stay
Thank you so
safe.
much.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Okay, then let's close the meeting. Thank you very much.